All right, guys, welcome back to round 2 of Ops Unfiltered. This is our first time that we have a returning guest. Today we have Darin Long.
Thanks for having me back, Jared.
Yeah, no problem. So Darin, last time he came on, he regaled us with plenty of stories with his decades and decades of experience through sourcing and manufacturing. Darin is the quintessential sourcing expert. I'm not sure what he hasn't manufactured. Everything from batteries to hard goods to soft goods. A lot of things.
Quite a few things.
He's run a company that had significant presence in China and sourcing from Asian manufacturers. Then most recently, he's pivoted over, not pivoted, but you've bought a factory in Guatemala. You're getting more established in South America and Central America manufacturing. So last time Darin came on, it was our best viewed podcast, and I think it was because of the value and the wisdom that he provided. I wanted to have him back because I feel like we were just scratching the surface when it comes to value, like valuable answers that he could bring to the table. So yeah, we prepped a lot of questions, and these are specifically for brand owners and company owners that are manufacturing, and we've got some very specific questions that I hope will be very valuable.
I agree, Jared. The first time you had me in, I thought it was for my looks and stuff, and I realized, no, obviously, my wife told me it wasn't either.
We fixed the lighting this time, too, because the lighting was making him look bald, and that's not true.
Thank you, Jared. You really accommodated.
Yeah.
But the last time was completely unscripted, and it took me down paths and experiences and basically opened up some experiential memories that led to critical learnings back when I was really young, carried forward over decades of time. And of course, other learnings that built upon former learnings, as technology and manufacturing processes changed in China and the markets just exploded, right? And technology exploded. So I really appreciate you providing some additional questions that lead to critical thought processes for today and how to make decisions and how to critically assess supply chain risks and values and stuff like that. So I really appreciate your insight.
Yeah, no worries. I think that in my life, failure is the biggest teacher. Like, what little experience I can give to people normally just comes from my failures. So I hope today, you have decades of success, but also failures that have taught you. And you have some really valuable lessons around tooling and intellectual property, managing your clients, trusting you with all of that information, and what have you learned about guaranteeing the success or the successful completion of a project without IP getting stolen, without your tooling being stolen. So let's go ahead and I'd say let's start diving into some of the tooling management questions that we talked about. So, but before we even start, give us like a 2 or 3 sentence answer. What is tooling for people who are watching?
Cool. So any shape that you have, any form that you have, whether it's metal, plastic, anything, it goes through an engineering process for development.
Like this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And this particular device is probably going to have 4 or 5 tools.
How do you know that right off the bat?
Well, you've got a cap on the back. You know that you've got an inside capsule. You also have a series of membrane switches here on the top, and those are going to be their own tools as well. Each one of these components is going to have a tool which has a cavity, and that cavity then receives an injection of plastic to create each one of the components. Or for this, the membrane is going to have a 2-piece, and on the back side of it is going to have a circuit board and a chip that receives the signals and converts those into RF signals depending on whatever the signal is. Yeah. So ultraviolet. At any rate, that is the tool set. And you can have an individual tool, and sometimes your tools will have single cavity, dual cavity, triple or quadruple cavities. And that will allow you to either make one whole component out of one tool set or multiple of the same components out of one tool set. Basically, it's a matter of regulating the flow of the plastic or whatever your substrate is into the tool at a regulated point, so you're not going to have any curls or pulls or any drags in it. So it's always going to come out the same uniform piece, thousands by thousands by thousands. So that's a tool.
So and a tool it's made to manufacture at scale, because like any Tom, Dick, or Harry can like come up with a prototype, wooden or metal or whatever. You can hand make a lot of things, or even just 3D print. But tooling is entirely different. It's what allows you to manufacture at scale, right?
It is. It allows you to put together things at volume at a highly regulated pace and quality control. Any other type of tooling, whether it's a vacuum form or something like that, they provide modes of error that you don't have in this sort of rigorous tooling process.
So tooling management, so when you get a tool done for a customer, how often do factories pass that around, or something gets stolen? Is it a real issue?
The answer is yes. So as a supply chain specialist, one of the most important things that I ever did was quickly identify the fastest course or path for a product to be brought to market. Often that is researching your competitor's supply chain and then identifying the hurdles within. They're basically your subject matter for study, right? And you're going to identify what the weak points are and what the strong points are of their supply chain, all the way to tooling and the production facility that either made the tooling or uses the tooling to manufacture your product. And early on, what I recognized is these tools were often for rent. Now, I'm not saying that I ever rented any of those, Jared. But I know at times many of those tools were also used for sampling for other people's products. The factory, if you didn't go there, you wouldn't know they were doing this, that they were sending you someone else's product as evidence that they were capable of making that product for you. So every time you mount your tool onto an injection system, and every time you take it off, you suffer the risk that tool is going to fail. Moving it on from the factory floor on the back of a truck into a warehouse, you suffer the risk of having a failure in your tool, or having it damaged, fall off the truck, fall off a lift. Mm-hmm. So what you want to do is you want to mitigate that risk by limiting the moves and limiting the mounts. And that's where a lot of the cost is in tooling, is making it and maintaining it, as well as preparing it to load on the equipment for manufacturing. That could be 2 or 3 hour cycle time. And when you put it on your machine to make your parts, you want to make sure you get as many parts, good parts as you can, pull the tool right off and get it in safe storage. And most people won't ever tell you this, but the only way to secure your tools, there's only 3 ways that you can secure your tools from other people borrowing or loaning or making samples on. One is you have a counter installed in the tool itself.
What's a counter?
The counter is it's a mechanical, non-digital. It's a mechanical switch where every time it is parted and joined, there's an internal counter that you can't remove that tells you how many times it's been parted.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Now, that's the most expensive method to do it, and some people say...
That's expensive.
It's relatively expensive.
Okay.
The process we like to do the most was the simplest and easiest for me was using a can seal, like a 40-foot or 20-foot container. There's a seal that's put on that container before it ships. And that seal can't be broken, or else there's heck to pay for that. So we would use those seals to bind our tools to make sure that they couldn't be opened and used. The seal would have to be broken, and then it would be opened and then resealed. So we would seal the tool with that twist-on seal, and then take a picture of it and log that, and then use that for our next use.
Well, would somebody? I might be ignorant here, but would somebody still be able to break the seal and then reseal it without you knowing? No, okay.
No, it's impossible.
Impossible.
Like
Got it.
Container.
Okay.
It's impossible to avoid detection, tamper detection.
Got it.
The third is you simply take it off-site and you store it in your own warehouse. So we would also...
So physically nobody's going to touch it because it's just right in your back.
Lock and key in your own. We would take off-site, store off-site, and seal. And those are the least expensive, most sure ways that you're going to have to prohibit your tools from being used for someone else's supply chain.
Again, help me understand a little bit more. Like, so the problem is, okay, I have this gizmo or this gadget. Like, client comes to you with a, I don't know, 3D printed sample, and you're, oh, great. Here's the tooling that's going to happen. They pay for it. The tooling gets made. So the danger is, you're away from China, you're away from the factory, and they could be just sending this to another factory for them to use it. And
exactly.
It could be, so that's common though, or like relatively common.
I don't want to say how common it really is, but it was a practice that was available to us over and over and over again.
Like you could have called somebody up and been like, hey, we really need the tooling for this. Can we borrow it? And they're like, it's kind of like behind the scenes.
Yes, especially for prototype processes. Now, if there are design patents in place, you definitely don't walk into a scenario or walk a client into a scenario where you're basically helping them violate someone else's intellectual property. But in the design process, often you found this as a rapid way of prototyping, and then you would adjust your design processes.
Okay, that makes sense.
Just slightly off. But the truth is, you're still using someone else's capital to advance your own product development. And when I realized that was happening, we quit doing it. Most people don't know this happens behind the curtain. There's a lot that goes on in Oz.
So you would talk to factories, and you just didn't know that that's how they were producing the prototype. And as soon as you figured out, you're like, no, I don't want to have a part of that.
You often wonder why they were as fast as they were. How could you get this prototype, or how'd you get this sample done so fast? You didn't always know it was a Sony product or an Indian product or a product from another country, and you could often search your own databases and have your own attorney search the IP database and make sure that you're not stealing someone's IP, but not everything is out there. And so the speed with which they would render a sample sometimes was just staggering, and it was like, wait a minute, how did you do it so fast? You're so good. Then they'd open the curtain to me. And that's how I learned that was a critical path process for them to be so rapid and fast to market. Number two was, once they knew that you wanted a tool similar to this, then they would take you to the tool factory that made that particular tool. Because now instead of them having to rewrite all of the code, the code necessary to make that tool, all they would have to go in to do is to tweak a few of the parameters, and then now you suddenly have a different arc or a different shape or a different whatever, and they're not spending as much time in the reprogramming of the CNC machines and the code.
Wow, that's really interesting. So this is still a related question, but
Sure.
Is it possible to do tooling in the United States? Or I guess, let me rephrase that question.
Absolutely.
What is the most cost-effective way to do tooling? And what is your recommended way of doing tooling?
Okay, I would say there's two recommended ways. One is the way that you feel most comfortable with, and the other is the path or method that is the fastest to market. Sometimes they are the same. Often they are not, because you feel like you need to have more quality control over the tool or how it's developed or made. And if you have a deep pocketbook, making your tools in the United States are fine. It's fine. But I have worked with toolers here in the United States. I've worked with toolers in India. I've worked with toolers in China. And India and China are by far faster than any tool makers I've ever worked with in the United States.
Interesting. And so, why is that? Just infrastructure?
There's a little bit of infrastructure to it. We never seem to be waiting for tool steel in China or India. There were blocks of steel along the roads where people would come and basically have it cut off and then have it delivered within 4 hours or 8 hours to the tooling plant to start being planed and ground down or put in the EDM machines. So we never seem to have a shortage of tool steel available. Many of our first prototype tools, though, were made in aluminum to make it really quick, get your prototypes right. If you have to do any redos, aluminum tooling is quicker. And then we would move to steel tools after we proved the design.
Interesting. Why would somebody do tooling in the United States? You said a deep pocketbook, but...
A deep pocketbook and control over the process, make sure there's a lot of people, engineers, and from well-founded experience, they might say that the attention to detail wasn't given, or that the Chinese will make a tool too fast, which results in its shortened lifespan. So instead of getting 1 million pieces out of your tool, maybe you're only going to get 500,000 pieces out of your tool.
I've also heard stories that Chinese tooling or Asian tooling versus American, tell me how right or wrong I am. Like, for example, going back to that remote, if there's blemishes in the tooling, it will come out in mass production. Like, there will be like random, it won't be as smooth. Is that true or no?
Not really.
Okay.
I've never experienced this. If we have a surface condition in a tool where we want a sand finish, or we want a high gloss finish, or we want a smooth or semi-smooth finish, those are all declared in the design documents. And there are periodically flow processes within the tool cavity itself that are not engineered the way they could, because when you have a pen and your pens get pushed and the injection process occurs, when that plastic flows in, if the tool isn't the right temperature and the plastic isn't the right temperature, you're going to see flow lines, and it's going to look like a blemish from an outsider's perspective. And you're going to look and see there's a pattern on the plastic. Sometimes that's not a tool. It's just a matter of this is an early part.
Yeah.
And things weren't up to temperature yet. But if that's going to be coated or chrome coated or painted or anything like that, normally the manufacturer doesn't care about that.
All right. So moving on to intellectual property.
Oh, this is a hot one.
Yeah. So you told me before this that you have like a pretty big secret that you can share with us, like something that you never shared on a podcast. What is the best kept secret around Chinese IP that you can share with us?
All right. I'm quite sure that you've never heard this, or no one's ever heard this on a podcast. There are what's called black books in China. And if you're a manufacturer of a motorcycle, and I had a co-invested factory where we were making motorcycles in Chongqing years ago, and we needed to do some research. I didn't know what the nature of that research would be and where it would lead us. And one day I walk in, Jared, this is one of the most eye-opening experiences I ever had. I walk into our meeting room with engineers are all there, and everyone that was planned to be there was there. And there were these large black books on the table, and they were thick, 4 inches thick, 6 inches thick, and large books, maybe 2 feet by 2 feet. They were in varying sizes. And when you open them up, they included the full blown up diagrams of this particular one was a Honda 450 motor, along with the Honda frame.
So this is like insane IP at your fingertips.
It was the full deconstructed, I don't remember what year it was, Honda 450R or Honda 450. From soup to nuts, and included metallurgy for the motor. It included hardness for the nuts, bolts, torque.
No way.
Torque things down. No. Cam sizes, motor.
I thought that was just like a myth. Like,
no, there's no myth. These are real. And if you're in that particular industry, it's not like I could walk in and check out one of these books. You submit a request. The request is reviewed, and then you're told when your volume or volumes are available. And that would allow manufacturers to rapidly assess what the marketscape looked like from a technology perspective, and for them to rapidly duplicate if they wanted to, or to borrow some of the metallurgy, the understanding, whatever element they wanted to borrow and implement within their own current production design, whatever they wanted to do.
Do you think the Chinese get a bad rap for like as IP stealers, or is it just the fact that maybe everything is just like so open source and openly shared? What's your thoughts on that?
Yes, they do get a bad rap. They begin the bad rap for years. But when they say bad rap, there's IP theft. Is it actual theft and then implementation?
What's the difference between studying, for example, like a Honda engine and like taking... What's the difference between theft and studying then?
The difference between theft and studying, some would say there's a broad line and some would say there's a fine line. But when you see the actual product being built in exact duplicate or close to exact duplicate and put on the road and sold and implemented, that's when you know. I had the unique experience of, this would be a completely different podcast, of being on a military base at one time, being told that a particular IP that I was responsible for was not duplicable and could not be manufactured. And the license agreement under which we were operating could not be executed. And I flashed a name card, walked in, I was on the base, and then I saw pictures of the product and announcements where the product was being sold to military and to police. So I knew that the IP that we were representing was in fact being built, commercialized, and sold.
Wow.
Yes. So you know that IP is being shared, and off of that IP, a lot of the copying and everything that's going on has been used to develop industries in China. I'm probably going to get in trouble for that.
But it's also it's so interesting though that, you know what comes to my mind, this is super random, but I watch anime. So one of those, in almost every single anime, there's this concept of like a library with big books that just has the information for everything. And it's so interesting, like in Avatar: The Last Airbender, there's this library that you go to. It's called Wan Shi Tong's library. And basically you can like research anything. And I feel like there's some truth to that in China. Like there's some actual libraries like this.
I've seen evidence that there are libraries like that. That it was amazing to me what these volumes held. And we spent days poring over them. We had to return them on a schedule. But I would never have been able to see a Honda and we could have got the Suzuki, a Yamaha, Kawasaki, whatever style, design, year, make, model we wanted. We would have been able to receive the full diagrams and metallurgic reports and hardness reports of everything.
Wow. So what's the most blatant IP theft that you've ever personally experienced?
That one experience was there was a Swedish company and their IP in China.
Okay, got it. When you get a client and they entrust very secretive IP, what measures do you go about to protect that intellectual property?
You know, we approach everyone's IP with a high degree of respect, because it doesn't matter if it's a remote control, whatever the widget is, if it's an inductor or if it's some sort of battery or anything. It's to that individual, that IP is a considerable investment to them and very valuable to them. So we treat each piece of IP or design or development with the same amount of respect. The first thing we do is we break it down into its individual components, and we identify which things would create a differentiated notion of what this product really is. Most things are plastic boxes, enclosures, carriers, straps, bands, whatever you could break, and it all looks common until you reach a certain level of assembly or this one component which creates this differentiating thing or causes a person to say, what is this? And what is this for? That key component then we take to a more controlled, recognized site or a manufacturer, someone that we know we can trust to make that one component, and that's all he'll make. The rest of the components will be made somewhere else in a more commoditized platform. And then what we may do is we might delay the final assembly to a certain point, a time, or a location where we have a higher degree of control over the assembly process, and put that more IP-centric or differentiating component in last. If it's a matter of software or firmware that helps make it fully IP-laden, that's a little easier, and you can always pull that to the final end, or even do the firmware injection here in the United States.
Do you ever feel like that is a bit overkill? Like, for example, if brands watching this are really concerned about, I don't know, taking a design to China or to Mexico, when should they take those measures versus like, doesn't really matter. Like, just give it to the factory.
Jared, that is a really good question. In the light of Honda, Kawasaki, and all of their IP basically being laid bare for anyone to research, and they've got deep pockets to protect that, and seeing then that IP basically proliferated through the market, whether it's hidden under a different brand or inside of a motor that no one will ever open and operate, there's IP leak. We call that IP leak. Yeah. But when you're talking about small manufacturers, 1, 2, or 3 product-focused companies, knowing that in 30 days their product could be on Amazon, competing with them, they want to ask themselves, how long do they have? Not if it will happen. How long do they have? We have a new client who basically was producing their products, had them online for 6 months, and as soon as they moved towards a threshold of approximately 1,000 sales per month, a new Amazon vendor came on. It was a Chinese factory, and the Chinese factory threw a lot of advertising at it, marked things down $3, $4, $5 under what the original product cost was, and then basically began scooping their market, taking all of their sales from Amazon. Their sales dropped by like 30 or 40% over the first month.
I mean, I know personally a lot of people like that. Right. One of my friends, Jason, he owns Dorai Home. Alicia's the CEO, but they're a Luminous client. But they sell bath stones, and Chinese knockoffs are like the number one killer of their sales on Amazon. It's insane.
It is. They duplicate the whole Amazon sales model and the product. And unfortunately, and I'm not going to say it. Unfortunately, the first place we would blame is our own factory and say, gosh, who else would have been able to replicate this so fast? The truth is, it's not often that factory, because they don't want to lose you either as a brand. And they feel pain when you lose market share to someone who's copying them. They don't like it. They don't like it any more than you do, which is one of the most interesting cultural passions that we share.
Mm-hmm.
They don't like being knocked off. And if
interesting
happen from within their factory, they let those people go, fire them, and often they will sue them locally. But it happens, Jared. This is one of the. So it's not a matter of do we start it early on. The question is, did you start it early enough, and how long can I hold off through some sort of unique engineering process, or hold off people from copying me out of China?
I have a belief that people a lot of times are a little bit too conspiratorial when it comes to like my IP's been stolen. Oh, this must have happened. He must have passed this to his cousin and then got the key. How often do you think stuff like that, like this conspiratorial behind the scenes stuff, is actually happening? Or is it just a factory, they just see this, oh, this is a great product, we can make it, they copy it the best they can and then undercut you?
I have grown away from the conspiratorial side of things to where there's so much information available through third-party access and data evaluation of the top stores and top sellers and TikTok and Amazon and Shopify, everywhere else. You're exposed 24/7. And if you've got an appetite for it, you're going to study your competitor, and you're going to study them thoroughly, and you're going to go duplicate their process because that's an easy path for you to make revenue. People do it here. I see people all the time saying, I'm going to show you how to duplicate this website or this product or whatever, left or right. But it's really no longer a matter of do I protect it? It's a matter of how can I, and prolong the period of time between now and when someone does it. And then what is your strategy going to be when someone else introduces a competitive product? You should compete not just by price, but maybe have a supplemental offering that keeps people seeing that you're in the product development life cycle and offering more, higher value, not just the race to the bottom.
Right. Well, changing lanes a little bit right now. As somebody who has worked in sourcing myself, I always found it challenging to find people that you could trust, because you're going to a foreign country to source products. A lot of times you're bringing IP, your life's work for many inventors. So the people that you entrust in China, in Vietnam, in Mexico, to me, sourcing in China, the number one problem was always trust. Is this person representing me? Absolutely. Do they have values? So I'm just curious, how have you found trustworthy, value-driven Chinese people as you've sourced specifically in China for so many years?
Partners or factories or individuals, those relationships are curated. You focus on curating those relationships. I have a good story for this one. It was Oklahoma. I think it was 2:00 in the morning. There are only certain phone numbers that will ring through on my phone at that hour, and it was Una Lin, and Una worked for an electronics company that I had, and she was the export sales manager. She was in a position of relative responsibility, and reported directly to the owner of the company and the president of the company. And Una delivered a really painful bit of news to me. She said, "Darin, I think the batteries that you have selected and purchased specific for this electronics item are being used in someone else's supply chain, and what is being inserted and put into your product is someone else's substandard battery."
So part of the manufacturing process, you had pre-bought specific batteries to go into the assembly, and she's calling out, "Hey, Darin, that's not happening."
That's exactly right.
Got it.
Many of us have nominated vendors, and we're all familiar with nominated vendors. These are people that have gone through a significant level of vetting, and in many cases, you have pre-purchased the item, the chip, the component or subassembly from them specifically for your overall build.
Okay.
They're designated. And in this particular case, Jared, I had gone through the complete supply chain for this lithium battery to make sure we didn't have perforations within our linings, to make sure that we weren't going to have any of these spontaneous combustible.
So them switching it up, this was a big deal, like major QC issue.
Major liability issues.
Okay, wow.
Major liability issues. And so when Una told me this, she said, "Darin, I'm probably going to lose my job for letting you know this."
Oh my God.
And I said, "Una, you probably will, but I thank you for having the integrity to call me and let me know this. But let's work this out in a way that you won't have to lose your job." I said, "We'll do it this way. Give me a couple minutes. I'll call you back. I'll have a plan." I called Una right back, and I said, "Una, don't tell anyone else. I'll be on the next plane, and I'll be over there, and we'll do one of our random factory visits. You'll be surprised. I'll be surprised. I'll walk in, and we'll take a look at the line.
What's
and we can all discover this together."
Yeah.
And in this process of discovery, identify the root cause, identify the potential damage, the delay to shipment, and everything that you would discover in the process of discovery. And let's just meet with the engineering team and see where it goes. And she said, "Darin, thank you for respecting the potential for me to lose my job. And I love this plan. We can make this work, and everything will go well." We did. Long story short, I hired Una to be my China manager.
You poached her. Nice.
And I learned a lot from Una, because once I empowered her to help lead me through this fact-finding, discovery process and the engineering and how things can work, she basically illuminated to me all of my own weak points within a factory manufacturing process that I wouldn't have seen on my own because I'm not there. And if you're not there and you don't have a presence, you're going to have components, subassemblies replaced. It happens. This is a pervasive challenge. Even with nominated vendor delivered product, they can still be packed in someone else's product.
So a subassembly is just you have a bunch of core components, like a manufacturer will take on the building, for simplicity, of an iPhone. And within this, there's your bill of materials might have like 10 components, and within those 10, couple of them will for sure have sub-assemblies that have to go to somewhere else.
That are delivered from somewhere else.
Okay. And so what you're saying is to cut costs or to bring up lead times, factories will routinely, if you're not there, they'll get a different sub-assembly.
Unfortunately, if the management is not of high integrity, the management, in this case, we learned that the management had made the decision to elevate the product of one of my competitors with my battery through a different guarantee and warranty. So they oversold their own internal product and said, we will guarantee this battery, this long life, this recharge capability, and flammability research. I already had the Bureau Veritas and SGS reports on what the battery, in terms of durability, rechargeability, and lack of call it flame retardants in life. I already had that. And so they just took my report, put someone else's name on it, and then showed it to their client, and basically replaced their original battery stack with mine.
That is insane. And it's no wonder. That's why I do have some empathy for, for products that get busted, and, maybe the CEO of this small company was actually oblivious. Like the factory was just swapping out a sub-assembly and they didn't know. It's why they need a company like yours and also experience like yours to understand what things are happening and how to stop it. And
supplemental to that, for future and future experiences where we had relatively high complex builds, we would place a potential employee in a hiring process to be hired in the factory for a corporate intelligence perspective. If we had long run products and clients with long run plans, we would have people hired into their assembly line. And it was part of our built-in cost for the product. Now, most companies, most people, they wouldn't think to go through this corporate intelligence process to help understand and secure their supply chain and their manufacturing and assembly. But if you don't do this, you're missing one of your most valuable insurance protocols possible, knowing the inside workings of your own product and your own factories. That doesn't mean I distrusted the factory owner or management. There are many motives to things being shifted and changed in process.
So tell me, is it possible that your tools are being used to support China's supply chain unknowingly?
This is a sad truth. If you are not using one of these three tool securing methods, your tools are being used for other people's supply chains. You either have a counter in the tool, you're using a container seal to wrap your tool and make sure it's not being parted and used at another time, or 3, you're not moving it off-site.
Wow.
I'm sorry to say that, but yeah.
That's insane. Now, also just closing out the story about Una, what comes to my mind as you say that is you can't train ethics, because right there you can train QC all day and the best practices and how to source sub-assembly, but that's none of that. This is just ethics. That was it, and it's just something that you can't train, like somebody just wanting to do right by the customer.
Many people say you can buy loyalty, you can pay for trusts, but the truth is, it all boils down to an individual integrity and honesty. And that can be either at the individual level, or you can see it within departments, and it can be institutionalized. But if you have bad actors within an organization, sooner or later you begin to see this integrity erosion, where they're moving your product to a lower cost because margins are being pinched, inflationary pressures are driving costs up. If you don't have open dialogue, or you have the right eyes in your process all along, and frankly, that you're open as the buyer, that you're open to the fact that inflationary pressures and costs of labor and capital are increasing, you periodically do need to reevaluate your cost structure. If you keep pushing back, you're forcing them into a scenario where they have to take measures
Yeah.
are not forward-facing. That's an illegitimate design and development practice when you're not opening things up and having open dialogue on what the entire marketplace are.
That's so interesting. Yeah, we've talked a lot about the good and the bad of Chinese manufacturing. With the United States trying to move as much manufacturing to the continent, to North America and South America as possible, what do you think they can learn from China manufacturing? What do you think they can learn from Chinese manufacturing?
Well, Jared, this is a struggle I have as an American citizen. And it's not something I complain about. I'm not whining or complaining, but when you try to manufacture anything here in the United States, you struggle with an appetite for work, an appetite to make a quality product. You struggle with environmental regulations. Are we sustainable? And are our hiring practices correct? You spend an awful lot of time focused on non-production related activity sets. And you feel like you lose a lot of traction. One of the things I found in China and basically was one of the things that I enjoyed the most working in China. When I went over there, everyone was focused on output. How can we make the output better? How can we make our product more relevant? How can we maintain relevancy? How can we do it faster? How can we meet the customer's expectations more quickly, efficiently, effectively? How can we make them look better among their peers? This is in every single production meeting we ever had. These were key elements in the discussion and often led the remaining balance of our discussion. And they focused on aligning capital to meet those needs. If we needed a tool, if we needed a new piece of equipment, if we needed anything, it was a phone call at the table. The bank or the bank would send a person over to meet with me or meet with us. Mm-hmm. The tooling factory would send someone over, or whoever was selling equipment that would be related to the manufacturing of this. Maybe it was a unique direct-to-garment printer. Maybe it was a heat transfer process, or maybe it was a rotomold. It didn't matter. The factory would send a sales rep over, and they would meet with us within 30 minutes to an hour if they were there. And they were corporal to our meeting. If you have a meeting, a design meeting, or anything here, you're lucky to call back in a week. You're lucky to have everyone that you ever need at the table, really at the table, or circled in for a meeting.
It sounds like they just cut out all the fluff, and it's purely output focused.
It's an alignment issue. They are aligned, and they really are not aligned and focused on profit. Interestingly, at first, they believe profit trails customer satisfaction.
Which
you don't hear that very often.
Well, it's funny because you say that, and that is a common thought. That's a prevailing thought in SaaS. Like SaaS, software as a service, like Luminous. I mean, that's the whole point of why you fundraise and you lose money. It's interesting that that's how the Chinese think about it.
And so here in the States, I find it difficult to find government programs, protocols, support to create this native alignment. If there was a major issue over in China, you literally would find government, though he's not a high-level official, you would find an economic development personnel sent over from your local government offices. How can we make this work for you, Mr. Long?
Wow. Oh, there's no way.
Right? And so what we've missed here is rapid-to-market industrialization where capital markets, labor markets, and even your political interests are aligned to deliver a product. That may happen in large Fortune 500 companies, but in the small entrepreneurial engagements, you don't find that level of alignment and marshaled resources to help enable the U.S. small manufacturer. That's what we're missing, Jared.
Do you feel like that comes from the political landscape and what is being prioritized socially, or like what do you what is that actually a symptom of?
Well, it may be political will. It may be a matter of, hey, this is too small for me to show interest in. It may be a matter of, this isn't my wheelhouse. or we need to focus on something a little more high-tech, longer vision, whatever. But when you're talking about a manufacturing base to support a society, to support a region, whatever their needs are, I think the same mentality and focus of delivery should be the same, just enabling factors of production for alignment to drive capacity and profitability. And I feel like I'm missing that. Having built a factory in Linden to make PPE during COVID, it was a struggle to get someone out there simply to provide us electricity. It was 90 days before we had even remotely close to the amount of electrical service that we needed.
Wow.
90 days.
That is insane.
Unfortunately, it was difficult.
Last question on this, but what is the stereotype of the Chinese kid soldering away in a heated factory? Is that a true stereotype for most factories? Like, I guess are the labor issues that are really highlighted in the United States, particularly like social issues, did you find that to be true, or was it frequently happening?
In the 90s, there were what you would readily consider and label as child labor issues that were going on, especially in the handicraft.
Okay.
But in the factories where I spent most of my time, an easy early review would let you know that no, there weren't child labor. We wouldn't have child labor issues there. One of the cultural variances between the United States and China is that in order for anyone in China to go to middle school or go to high school or go to a trade school, they had to sit for tests that were progressively difficult. And if you did not test to get into a trade school or go into middle school at 12 to 13 years of age, you were left without an educational path or progress path forward. You could retest, but if you didn't test well, you needed to work on the farm, or you needed to work somewhere else to help complement your family's need for additional income and to help maintain your needs too. And so I think from an agrarian, more agrarian society to a more industrialized society, early on we were extending a requirement that from a culture and society early on, it was difficult for China to attend to, because many of those child laborers, we would call them, 14, 15, 16 years old, they were already gone through trade school and trade training in order to participate in that level of industry. And so from a Chinese perspective, it wasn't illegal, it wasn't against the law, and they were trained. But from our perspective, they shouldn't even have a job yet. From a culture, I recognize the differences in our cultural, ethical, legal frameworks that we had from the U.S. to China. Mm-hmm. Witnessing that in China, I recognize they had a much larger population base that they needed to support and sustain. And this sort of process had, through their industrialization process, was one of the factors they found to help smooth out consumer base or an agrarian transition into a mechanized industrial base. And it was a bumpy road, but they took attention to it, and there wasn't a single parent that wanted to send their child to a difficult or harsh workplace.
Right. And
many of the parents worked with their own children in the same factory to make sure that they weren't inappropriately used or abused.
Right.
And what I witnessed was that, Jared. It was hard. Sometimes it was difficult for me to see and witness, but I recognized that I was in a different culture and I was in a completely different environment, and I tried to weigh it in terms of a new learning for myself. But I saw it very few times, and I was always careful to be mindful of that at the factories.
Right.
Only the 90s, though, early 90s.
Okay. I think this will be our last question. Which is there one of these questions? Yeah. Is there one question that you had like a killer story lined up for? I think we made a lot of headway though. Well, but there's a lot. There's 17. Holy crap. And there's 20.
ID protecting client designs, tool management. We cut those. Supply chain mysteries. Technical advancements. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Okay. That one was an eye-opener. Not that that is applicable here. So my wife and I were in I'm going to have to water down. We were in an institute, but it was the Nanjing area. Are we on?
Yeah. But it's yeah. Well, so which question am I asking though?
Oh, man, not sure. I really want to go holding time. We saw Pentium chips before they were released here in the U.S., and we saw them controlling little robots in a lab. And the research students that were showing us.
Well, I'll start with. So this will be our last question for today. We might have to do like part 3 or something. What's been one of the craziest things that you've ever seen in China?
So my wife and I worked at an institute for a period of time teaching English. And I taught United Nations Development Volunteers English and was taught business school and engineering students English from a particular practice. And we were invited several times to go see some of what their projects were because they wanted to learn English specific to their project and be able to introduce their project in English. It was part of their assignments.
Uh-huh.
So we were introduced and invited to go to a particular lab, and it was a robotics lab. And my wife and I are not expecting anything other than just see a robotics lab. He pointed to where they were, so it couldn't be high tech because the windows were always open.
Right.
Which in most universities back in the 90s, that's the way they were. There wasn't any central air or environmental controls. So we walk upstairs and we walk in. It's an open classroom with seating and blackboards around it. And over along the windows, there are soldering chairs, soldering stations, setups, and mini PCBs and stuff scattered around. And you saw little robots. And I was like, this is going to be cool. And when we walk over and we look at these robots, they're part Intel chips being used to control the robots. And you had 386s, 486s, and there was a Pentium chip there. And
what is a Pentium chip? Layman's.
Is there a Pentium chip today?
I don't know. I don't even know what it is.
It was a powerful, one of Intel's most powerful chips at the time. And I didn't even know they'd been fully released in the U.S. market yet. And it was one of those aha moments where it was like, the Chinese they are not just developing and trying to copy technology. They really are looking at being technology advanced and forward and implementing. Mm-hmm. And the next week, I had invited some of my friends from Nanjing University to come see the lab with me because one of them was a computer scientist. He was going into computer science at BYU. And we went up to the room and it was empty.
So what do you think happened?
We weren't supposed to be up there and we weren't supposed to see that.
Oh,
and it was research and development done under a direction, right? But we were two of the four foreigners on the campus, and we probably shouldn't have seen what we saw. The research moved to some other location. But that was still one of the most remarkable, eye-opening experiences I had with advanced tech, U.S. tech, being implemented and developed into processes in China.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, on one hand I thought it was way cool, on the other hand it was a little bit scary to see that.
Makes you wonder what they're doing nowadays.
Oh, sure.
30 years in the future, like AI now. I mean,
all sides of the pond, right? Everywhere around the boats.
Can we do that one question I asked and then like politically, how will either candidate do you think that sourcing.
Yeah, so actually, this is the last question for you, Darin. With the 2024 election looming over us, it was Biden-Trump, now it's Harris-Trump. What will a Trump presidency in 2024 do to the supply chain landscape? Say Trump gets elected, what will happen to supply chain?
Okay, I polished my crystal ball earlier. Had a couple of thoughts on this. That we will, in either one of the presidencies, we will see a continued advance and increase in the pace of nearshoring and reshoring.
Nearshoring, you're talking about, moving a factory to Mexico, for example.
Moving a factory to Mexico or Guatemala or wherever. We see an increasing and rapid rate of Chinese factories moving complete factories into Mexico and driving Mexican business further south, especially where it's a high labor rate, high labor cost, and a high labor component to the product. Our factory's actually making shirts and jackets and hoodies now for Mexican manufacturers. Wow. That's how rapid the change has happened. And many of those Chinese factories, and I've been questioned on LinkedIn with some of my other contacts, is this really happening? The answer is absolutely is. And the Chinese factories are investing in Mexican factories so they can benefit from NAFTA and CAFTA. Mm-hmm. That way they can have a renewed access to the U.S. and Canadian markets. That's their process. That's their plan. The plan has been laid out and they're executing on that plan. Will a Trump presidency or a Harris presidency change this? I think Trump would make action to see that these investment practices are curbed. He'll have to take multinational steps to limit this sort of market penetration. I don't see Harris administration doing anything. I see this being a foundational principle for them fixing the root causes that they determine are root causes for immigration, technological advance, and investment within the region. What they're doing, though, is they're allowing other countries that don't have similar aligned interests to the United States create those investment paths and create those jobs and leverage a trade platform that was not designed to benefit foreign actors. They were designed to benefit people within our hemisphere. And so the Harris platform would support the use of trade pacts with the United States for foreign actors, where I think a Trump presidency would seek to divert that and to change the platform so that those companies could not be leveraged to access the U.S. market.
Okay, well, that's a great answer. Well, I think we'll leave it there, and hopefully we can. There's still a lot more questions I want to dive into.
This was fun.
Thanks for coming, Darin. Hopefully we brought some kind of value today. But well, by the way,
factors.
Something I didn't ask on the last episode. I've been doing this with guests now. Where can people find you and reach out to you if they have questions?
On our website, it would be www.iascm.com. We're called Global Growth now.
Okay.
We provide sourcing and manufacturing support in both hemispheres, whereas previously it was mostly in Asia.
Okay.
Now we support that in our own hemisphere as well. Global sourcing, nearshoring, and reshoring support.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome.
Thanks, Jared. Thanks for having me on. These are always amazing opportunities to sit and reflect and help.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.